Hello again, you sick, twisted weather freaks, and welcome to another fun filled, action packed, and intellectually stimulating edition of This Week in Weather. I'm your host and meteorologist DT from Weather Risk, your captain of chaos, your colonel of confusion, your commander of catastrophe. Let's talk about this week in weather for this 18th of January 2023. And specifically, we're talking about two events here, really. Um, a little bit about the one coming up right now, January 19th to 20th in the eastern U.S., but mostly January 22, 23, and January 25, 26, and then we'll talk about February because there's much to talk about with regard to that. So we'll start out here by taking a look at this is the upper air map from January 16th, and you can see what we call the Pacific pattern. Notice we have this one trough here, the other one here, and this is the one that went through the East Coast here, January 15th. So this is the next system. Here's one coming in behind it. So this is, you can see we've got several systems. And notice they're just coming straight in from the Pacific. Boom, boom, boom. Also notice the flow. You see how the flow is coming out of eastern Pacific, Alaska? This is all Pacific air. There's no cold air coming down into the United States. And not surprisingly, look at the temperature anomalies for the past 7 days for the middle of January. I mean, really, really impressive. Now, Canada is also amazingly warm relative to normal because usually when the United States is fairly mild, some portion of Canada is also fairly cold. But you can see the anomalies here in central Saskatchewan, Manitoba, western central Ontario, north of the Great Lakes are, 10, 12 degrees above normal. But east of the Rockies, notice that the only cool air here is in the Rockies and west coast of Canada, of California, Oregon. The west and the Rockies. Everybody else is quite mild relative to normal. Here's the snowfall for the past 7 days. You can see again that all the big snow was clearly in I guess the Rockies and the Sierras. You can see that the Great Basin, Colorado. So Yellowstone, the Bitterroots, really tremendous skiing out there, but nothing going on you can see in any portion of the central. Got a little bit of snow in western Nebraska, but really nothing of any significance. Now, before we go into the actual models, let's take a look at the large scale patterns here, the things which are driving the atmosphere. So we can use these factors, what we call the large scale factors, to figure out what's happening with the weather models. So if you're a weather hobbyist or a weather nut out there and you're trying to figure this out, you want to look at the large scale features first to see how the models are reacting. Okay, so let's do that. Here's the MJO, the Maddie and Julian oscillation. And you can see this is from December 9th to the 17th. Now, back in the beginning of January, it looked like that the MJO is going to go into phase 8 and phase 1, which are really good snowstorm patterns for the East Coast in January. But as you can see, it didn't do that. Notice what happened is that even though it was projected to go into phase 8 and phase 1, it stayed here in the neutral circle. See that? It never came out. So that's one of the reasons why the talk of about a winter pattern in the middle of January for the East Coast or the New England or what have you fell apart because the MJO did not go where it was supposed to. So that's a problem. We have to be careful of that. And one of the reasons for that has to do with La Nina. La Ninas have a tendency of screwing up the MJO, sometimes makes it hard to forecast. Let me show you what's going to happen here over the next 2 weeks. So now we have three different MJO models here. This here is the GFS, this here is the European, and this here is the CFS, the climate forecast system. Now this takes us to February 1, all of these. You see that? Or January 31. So you can see this. Now here is the GFS. You see it takes it into phase 2 and phase 3, and it kind of hints at phase 4. Okay? And then this here's the European. Brings into phase 2 and phase 3, and then gets close to 4 and then turns it back to neutral circle. So it might hit phase 4, but then it goes back in, or might go back in at phase 3. And then this here is the CFS, which takes it into phase 2 and does a little loop-de-loop in phase 3 into early and mid-February. All right, well, what does that mean? Well, if we look at our general trends here, phase 2 is a big trough in the plain states, which is what we're seeing right now. All right, and what we'll continue to see, let's go look what the mean trough is. The negative anomaly, the blue here is the negative anomaly in the plains in the upper Midwest. And then phase 3 is kind of a neutral pattern here with a little bit of blocking north of the Great Lakes. So it's not great. And if we look at the individual maps here for La Nina, phase 2 Again, look at the negative anomaly here. The T stands for trough and the R stands for ridges, troughs and ridges. So you have a big ridge here in the Pacific, but then we have this big trough here in the middle portion of the country and a ridge on the east coast and in the western Atlantic Ocean. So this means low pressure areas are going to be tracking inland. See that? Going to be tracking inland right along the edge of the ridge here. Notice that the Greenland block, the NAO in Greenland, that this is positive. You can see the negative anomaly here, so it's strongly positive. And this is phase 3 when you have a La Nina. Well, there again, you can see a big trough on the west coast and ridging here in the Great Lakes in New England, and the Northeast. So this is not a good snowstorm pattern either. For the I-95 big cities, from Richmond and Charlottesville all up to DC, Baltimore, Philly, New York City, New Jersey, Boston. And you can see that. And here again, the NAO, negative anomaly here, trough. So the NAO is not looking good. Now let's take a look at those teleconnections. So again, we used this image before. The red line here shows the split. We have two teleconnections, which are special types of jet stream patterns or configurations. We have two on the Atlantic side, the Arctic Oscillation and the NAO, and we have two on the Pacific side, the EPO and the PNA. So let's take a look at what these are showing. And of course, there are various combinations. On the Atlantic side, for example, here we can have the NAO and the AO. And notice the different possible. Both can be positive. You can have one neutral, one positive, one negative, one positive. All these different combinations. And the same thing on the Pacific side. Here's the PNA, which is the ridge or the trough on the west coast of North America. And then this is your Alaskan ridge or Alaskan low, depending on what the EPO is doing. And again, look at the different possible combinations, 9 different possible combinations. So if we look at our actual charts here, these are 6 different models, and you can see the Arctic Oscillation. This is the Atlantic. Notice the black line here. Let me go back here 1 second and cut this out so we can follow it better. So here's the black line, and you can see this is where we are right now. We are negative. Now the models take it up towards neutral last week of January, and then they kind of keep it, either side of positive, negative, pretty close to neutral. See that? And the NAO is neutral right now. Look at the black lines, and it keeps it more or less neutral right through until February. So neither one of these are ideal for, East Coast snowstorms if you're looking for that. It's not bad for New England or for the Great Lakes, but it's not great for the East Coast. And then here, we can see the same sort of thing. Now this is the Pacific side. Here's the EPO. This is your Alaskan ridge or trough. Now right now it's slightly negative, then it was negative, now it's gone positive. And now look what it does. It kind of dips down towards negative by the end of January. And when the EPO is negative, except for this red line, which is the operational GFS, which is garbage. So when it gets into here, this could indicate some Siberian cross flow. So the pattern could be getting colder here. And the PNA, again, there's the dotted black lines. We are neutral right now. There's the neutral line you can see. And generally we stay neutral, and then it drops a little bit towards negative, which is a trough on the west coast, which is not what you want to see. So very, very mixed on the Pacific side here. So again, in summary, this is what you want to have if you like cold and snow on the East Coast in particular. You want to have the negative EPO and a positive PNA, which we don't have. We may get a negative EPO, but the PNA is negative, not positive. And we want to have a negative Arctic Oscillation, negative NAO, and we don't have that. Really, not very much so. We also want to have a 50-50 low in southeast Canada where the polar vortex wants to be displaced. And you want to have your ridge on the west coast or the Rockies. So as a go ahead here, let's take a look at our current systems. Now this is the current one. Look at the date here. This is what's going on right now. Wednesday evening. There's the big closed upper low. Here's the next one coming in. The next 2 pieces of energy here. Next trough and another trough here. But this is the current one, and you can see this big ridge here, which is why it got into the 60s and 50s from east of the Mississippi River today in most locations. Notice the black lines here. This is all Pacific air. All Pacific air. No way to get the cold air into the eastern or northern United States. Okay. And here's the surface map. Well, we have the one low in Kansas, a triple point low forming in eastern Oklahoma, Arkansas. There's our Canadian high to the north, right here, bringing down the cold air into the Midwest, seasonally cold air, nothing extreme. And then you can see the mild air on the East Coast. And if we look at the latest, this is from this afternoon, late this afternoon, you can see the big snow here in Nebraska and into Iowa, and the rain and thunderstorms. Oops, Louisiana, Arkansas, eastern Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, in the mild air. Now, what happens with this system? This is the first one. This is January 19th into the 20th. And you can see that the main low goes up into Michigan, and then a second low forms, what we call the triple point, right here. So there's the main low, comes up, you can see the Missouri into Michigan, and the triple point low forms in West Virginia. Then it jumps to the coast. So this is all rain in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Virginia, West Virginia, all rain, way, way, way too warm. But even you got a burst of snow in western New York State, and then it goes over to rain. And then even you can see even Boston here and Connecticut, all rain. Now, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, they all get good snow out of it. And you can see, look at the snow map. See, it's all north of Boston. Albany gets a good snow out of it. Vermont, New Hampshire, and this is important because they haven't had a lot of snow lately. So the Adirondacks is going to get hit, looks like, as well. So that's a nice little snow for them. All right, here's the second system. This is January 21. So there, this is drops down now from what was up here is now dropped down to the southwest. So this was the upper air map. So this system here, this is the next one, January 21. There it is. Okay. Now this is the one which leaves the coast on Thursday and Friday. Right there, leaves, goes bye bye. Here's the next one. So we have a ridge here over the Rockies, which is not bad, but we have no 50-50 low to speak of. The look at the look over Greenland. See the huge low there? That's a positive NAO, very positive. And we have a nice ridge over the eastern states. So this trough here. The low is going to develop here is going to track through the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley and into northern New England. It's not going to head to North Carolina. It's going to go this way, this way. Let's take a look. See. Well, here it is developing, and you can see there's the next system dropping down. So these systems keep dropping down from the Gulf of Alaska. See that? But this is the last one for a while. Notice the ridge developing here. See this ridge develops? So this shuts off the energy from Alaska. So there is the next system again, and this is one coming up for January 22, and this is January 25. All right, but then the ridge develops, and that shuts off the energy. You can see that here. See the ridge is shutting it off. So this is the one for January 22, 23. Deep trough, Great Lakes down to Mississippi, Alabama, but still have a ridge on the east coast. See that here? There's no blocking at all in Greenland. There's no real cold air. We're just getting a little bit of cold air finally coming southward, a little bit here from Alaska into the Great Lakes. Not great, but a little bit. And you can see this is the main trough, and this is the one coming up for January 25. Both very vigorous looking systems. So here we have January 22nd and January 23rd. So there's the low in eastern Tennessee, and you can see what it does. It goes right across eastern Virginia through the Delmarva, southern New Jersey, and then up towards Cape Cod. Now, if the system intensifies, it could pull enough cold air in here so the Shenandoah Valley sees accumulating snow, as does western Maryland and eastern West Virginia. But Pennsylvania gets hit pretty good with this storm. So does New York State and central and northern New England. Okay, not I-95. Let me show you. Large, okay? This here's the Mid-Atlantic region. So, look, this is rain. There's D.C., Baltimore, Philly, New York, Boston, Rhode Island, okay, coastal Connecticut, Norfolk, Raleigh, Roanoke, all rain. But the northern half of the Shenandoah Valley into the eastern panel of West Virginia, western Maryland, central Maryland, Hagerstown, Frederick, this is all snow, and pretty good snow at that, if this track holds. Now, if the low were to form, let's say, oops, let me move this low if I can a little bit here. If this low were to go inland, that would change it. If it goes over here, that would change it. But I don't think it's going to do that. This looks like a pretty solid track to me. And again, because of the upper air pattern. There's just no reason to think this low is going to go to the coast. Far enough off the coast to make it snow in I-95. That's just not going to happen. This is a mountain snowstorm. And if you look at the snow maps, here's the Mid-Atlantic snow map. You can see, again, not a big snow for the northern Shenandoah Valley, but 3 inches, 4 inches, very possible. And then in western Maryland, several inches there. Eastern West Virginia, pretty good snow there. And then in Pennsylvania, notice the big snow band that develops in northeast Pennsylvania into the Catskills and interior New England. And then you can see what it goes from there. So from here, Okay, where does the low go from here? Again, it doesn't do this off the coast. It goes right along the coast, right along the coast because of the upper air pattern. And you end up getting this. So we can see here's the low in New Jersey, and then here it is. It goes from New Jersey right over Boston. See that? That's all. That's rain. Okay, now in Vermont, New Hampshire, much of New York State, interior portions, north of Pennsylvania, all big snow in here. Okay, this is all really, really big snow in all this area. And you see it. There we go. Now, okay, so we're looking 10, 12, 14 inches potentially in these areas. This is all mountain snow. It's going to be a heavy snow, but it's cold enough to support it. And notice the other thing here. Notice the very sharp line of the snow versus rain. So, for example, northwest New Jersey could get 10, 12 inches when New York City gets rain. Same thing. Allentown could get 6 inches. Philadelphia, 0. Okay, Hagerstown, Frederick could get 4, 5, 6 inches. Baltimore, Washington, 0. Okay, so same sort of thing. Look at Boston. Look at this line here in Boston into central New Hampshire. Very significant. So, all right, that's the one for January 22nd. Now, here comes this system. This is the one for January 25. This one right here, right? Okay, so this is the one for January 22nd. It's now gone bye-bye into Maine and Nova Scotia, and where it might become a 50-50 low. So this has to be watched carefully. And this is the next system. It's in New Mexico, Texas. Now this is going to bring a big snow to many of the winter wheat areas where it's been very dry and drought there. So this is going to be a big deal. And now we're getting a ridge forming in the eastern Pacific. Not all the Rockies, but in the eastern Pacific here. And what happens is, okay, so here the upper low develops a negative tilt. You see how the black line, see the trough axis, you see this? See what's going northwest to southeast, or northwest to southeast. See how it's doing that? So the low is now inland because this thing is intensifying to west of the Appalachians. This is very bad for East Coast snowstorms. This is going negative too far to the west. This black line has got to be over the Appalachians. Instead, it's in the Tennessee Valley and the Ohio Valley. So the low forms in the Appalachians and goes inland. Even though we have a 50-50 low here, see that? We're getting some blocking near Greenland. We're also getting a nice ridge forming in western Canada. So this has potential. But the trough axis goes negative too far to the west. I mean, it's always something, right? It's always something. And sure enough, if you look at the development of the system, here we go. There's the low coming out of Texas. The primary low is in central or eastern Tennessee, secondary low forming South Carolina. Moderate snow western Tennessee, significant snow western Kentucky, southern Indiana, Ohio. Snow spreading into West Virginia, western Pennsylvania. Now it jumps to the coast here. This is late on January 25, a week from today. The low is right over downtown Richmond. See that? Okay. But it is raining in Washington, D.C. Okay, maybe a little bit of sleet mix in Baltimore. It starts off with snow in Philly and New York City. You can see that. And then look at the Shenandoah Valley. This is snow and sleet right in here, and then much of eastern West Virginia and western Maryland. Pennsylvania gets bombed, all of it. Ohio gets bombed. This is a nice looking storm for these areas. The question is Philadelphia going to stay all snow, go over to rain? Is New York City? I don't know. We'll see. But as you can look ahead, again, the low tracks right along the coast. Now, Boston at this point is all snow, according to the European model from this Wednesday afternoon. See that? Now, New York City's right on the edge, but huge amounts of snow in Pennsylvania, New York State, central and southern New England, almost all snow. But Northwest Virginia, look at Northwest Virginia here. It's still snowing. So big difference here potentially, let's say, between what Dulles sees in Washington, D.C., Winchester, Stroudsburg, Front Royal, Frederick, Hagerstown. Lot to worry about here in Northwest Virginia and Central Maryland with this storm. This has potential. Look at the snow map. I mean, look at this thing. Okay, so look at Washington, D.C., 0. Baltimore, 2 inches. Philadelphia, 2 or 3 inches. New York City, 4 or 5 inches. But just northwest. Huge amounts of snow northwest. So, for example, Charlottesville maybe 2 inches, but then Winchester's 10 inches. Is that right? 8 inches. Martinsburg 10 inches. And look at the huge snow of the Poconos, Allentown, north of Allentown really, but Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, State College, up into Binghamton, much of Massachusetts, northwest Connecticut, Boston right on the edge, suburbs 8 inches, 4 inches in the city. Now, again, I don't know if it's actually going to be that, but the point is that this low is going to be right along the track. Now, this one, if it shifts a little further off the coast, this could pull the snow track here. It could pull it closer to I-95. That's not out of the question. This has to be watched. This is possible. I don't think it's going to happen, but it could. And then up in New England, you can see what the snow map looks like here. So total snow, if you blow this up here, is 9 inches in Boston, according to this, but we'll see. It's several inches, and then even coastal Connecticut, New York City, several inches of snow here. Not all snow, but several inches. And then just again north and west in 95 and say places, in Lehigh Valley, much heavier snow. Northern New Jersey, much heavier snow. Central Maryland, much heavier snow. Central Pennsylvania. So, and even Ohio, don't forget my fans in Ohio, they're going to get pretty good snow out of this as well, it looks like. All right, now what happens after this event? Well, the pattern changes here. So we end up getting, the ridge is very broad here. It's not on the west coast, but we are getting this block here, this negative EPO. And that drops, you see how the lines are coming down here? See the lines are coming down here? This is now supplying Arctic air. The polar vortex is forced south into the Hudson's Bay. And then by January 31, February 1, we have a nice broad trough here. Now, having the trough on the west coast is not ideal for east coast storms or snowstorms, but as long as the ridge remains flat here, you could get waves of low pressure moving along with enough Arctic air coming down from Canada, so you could get winter weather here in the mid-Atlantic and the Ohio Valley. That's a possibility as we go into February. All right, longer term, we're talking about whether or not the polar vortex is going to warm, whether we're going to go to a stratospheric warming. A lot of talk about it. Here's one projection. Now, this tells you the amount of warming from the GFS model at the northern latitudes, between 40 and 80 north, up in the Arctic region. So you can see here that in late January, February, we're seeing this huge surge of warming coming up in the northern, at the top of the jet stream in the Arctic region. That's indicative of a break in the polar vortex. A lot of warming here. And again, as I mentioned, that could lead to a much different February and March in the eastern U.S., but it isn't a guarantee. We do know that it's going to warm. Here's another example. Now, this is from Judah Cohen. You can see here. Look at the negative blue here. This is cold temperatures. This is where we are right now. Okay? And you can see we've had a very strong polar vortex here. But look what happens after January 18th. We go into February. Look at the amount of warming showing up here. Very impressive warming at the very top levels of the atmosphere, right here, the very top. Huge amounts of warming. That's indicative of a warming Arctic. And let me show you what this looks like. So, this here is what the Arctic region looks like in terms of temperatures right now. So this, you can see the polar vortex right here. Oops. No, it didn't come forward. Let me try it again. There is the vortex right here, and you can see it, okay? It's a split right now. And we have warming here and warming in the Eastern Pacific and Northwest Canada and a little bit in Scandinavia. But there's the vortex, right, like this. It's stretched and it's elongated, but it hasn't split yet. Now, the models are doing this. What they're doing is they're developing two areas of warming here. This is January 28th. This is really, really warm temperatures here, warm anomalies, and the Arctic region. See that? See the warming? And then what happens is it splits, and the whole thing becomes very warm. This cold pocket that we're seeing here gets destroyed. See what happens? The cold pocket gets wiped out. So that by the time we get to January 29th and 30th, we can see an extremely warm Arctic region in Canada, in the North Pole, in Siberia, and Scandinavia. Very, very warm in Central Europe, Eurasia. Very, very warm relative to normal. So you can see the huge change from this. Look at the cold here, right, to this. That's an amazing transformation. if it's true. And then look at this finally. This is the GFS ensemble, not the operational GFS. An enormous, let me bring this forward again. Look at huge amount of warming. Unbelievable. Total pattern reversal. If this is true, it would tell me that February and March could be very active and quite stormy and snowy. Because if we have this sort of change in the pattern and the La Nina breaks down, we're going to be in business. Now, the problem is we need to see what the MJO is going to do here. Now, this is the extended MJO. This is my last slide. Okay. Now, this is the European extended, which takes us February 16th. Notice it goes into phase 3 and then it brings it towards neutral circle and then heads towards phase 7 or phase 8 by mid-February. Here's the extended GFS. Again, through the neutral circle, a little bit of phase 4, and then back into phase 7 by mid-February. So can we get 45 days of winter in the eastern U.S.? Maybe. Okay. There's no doubt that the vortex is going to warm and it's going to split. But I'm going to wait to see the MGO go into the right phases. It can't not go back into phase 2 or 3. It's got to come back out into phase 7, 8, and 1. These are much better phases for the eastern United States and the East Coast. If people want snow in the I-95 cities, you need to get into these phases here. So we'll see. It's got a lot of potential after January 29th. We'll see. I'd like to be optimistic, but it's been a frustrating January, to say the least. This is meteorologist DT from Weather Risk. I'll see you over on the Twitter page, over on the website, and over on the Facebook page.